Understanding what crowdsourcing is and how to apply it to your business. I started off the presentation by saying that traditional R&D is not working. In 2005, Booz Allen did a study of the top 1,000 R&D departments in America, and they found no correlation between the spending in R&D, sales, or investor ROI. And then, next. Traditional R&D approaches failed us. And in three critical areas. In transportation, we all still drive cars that were pretty much designed in the 1930s with a few extra microprocessors in there. Healthcare is largely a component and a sort of a leftover of World War II in terms of the way managed care is set up. And computing also really hasn't kept pace with our needs. You don't see a lot of happy Vista customers out there today. And a lot of that is really because we focus everything on the few smart people in the company that drive R&D, and we ignore all the rest of the employees and the customers, in many cases, that really can make a big difference. Next slide. Oh, one of my favorite lines is, the org chart is the only known antidote to innovation. And it's true. We still work largely in organizations that are the same in terms of the way they're laid out as the Industrial Revolution. And if you're not in the R&D box, you don't have permission within the company to do development and to come up with new ideas. Crowdsourcing is all about changing that. And the market realities that are present today that are helping to change that view of the world are the internet allows people to freely associate and publish on a scale that once you could only achieve through a large organization or a government. And the internet flattens all that and makes it really easy for individuals to have a voice. The other thing I've noticed is the price of knowledge is falling to zero. It really is. If you're a kid in India, you can audit a class at MIT for free. And to me, that is the true definition of the price of knowledge being absolutely zero. There's really nothing more valuable than an MIT or a Harvard education. Okay. So how are these things manifested in today's world? Today, 50% of all the websites, actually 57%, are served and controlled by open source software. And a lot of you may not have heard about that or are familiar with the term, but it's essentially software that's developed by volunteers who don't get paid, generally don't get paid for it. And the software they're producing is so good that you can run major websites on it. In fact, IBM has done a huge investment in a program called Linux, which is an open source software. Google relies primarily on the recommendations of web authors all over the world. They interpret the links on those sites as votes, and that is very much the power of the crowd, and it's very different than other websites such as Yahoo or search engines that rely on experts to sort of create taxonomies and come up with what they think the best view of the web would be for you. The other thing about Google is it uses crowdsourcing inside the company to perfect its business model. We'll talk about that in a second. 27% consumers research products online before going offline to make a purchase. And that's a big number because it really signifies the failure of advertising to control the market. And in a flat world, you really can't say that just because my commercials are better than anyone else's, you're going to come buy my product. 27% of people are checking it out online and within communities. And that's a big problem for a company that's very insular. One of my favorite statistics right now is that net book sales in 2008 topped 11 million units, and that's over 182,000 the year before. The media really isn't picking up on this, but open source software drives those netbooks. You can't afford a Microsoft license of $150 in a $200 netbook. It just doesn't work. So they've turned to open source to help drive that. So all around us, we're getting volunteer efforts and community efforts driving fairly large economic movement. We already mentioned this. IBM basically stopped making its server software called Domino 2 years back. And they started, they threw all into Linux, the open source software, and now they make twice as much money, and this is old numbers, this is 2003. They make $2 billion servicing Linux customers. And that's one of the themes you'll hear tonight. It's not that crowdsourcing companies make money by working with open source as a license fee. They make money by helping people who use open source understand and expand the capabilities of those open source software programs. And IBM's making good money doing that. So with all that, let's define crowdsourcing. For business, there is a difference, and Jeff Howe wrote a wonderful article and a book on crowdsourcing, but in his own words, he defines crowdsourcing for the wild. So we'll define the wild as Wikipedia and Google and those companies that are interfacing directly with the crowd. For business and with our customers, we find the best definition is crowdsourcing is a process of accessing groups of people with defined characteristics and tapping their knowledge to create something of value. And the Penn Club would be an excellent example of that. You all have defined characteristics. You all went to the same school. You're a community. And within that community, there's a lot of power to create new things of value. And the organizations that are using crowdsourcing are all around us. And here I'm just trying to reinforce the fact that it's not a fad. It really is here. And it's actually akin more to what we used to do in the distant past than it is sort of a new phenomenon. So here you have Netflix using crowdsourcing to perfect its recommendation engine. We already talked about Google, IBM, Procter & Gamble had a target of launching 37% of all its products this year through suggestions from the general public, and achieved that. Best Buy, which we're going to hear about from David, uses the power of its employees to help predict what will sell and what it's like to work at the company. And of course, we all know Wikipedia. I have a good historical example that's actually pretty powerful, and I have one from the present day as well to help you get an understanding for the value of crowdsourcing. Before Thomas Edison, before patents, before large corporations, crowdsourcing was really the way things were done, because you really only had large governments that were able to fund gigantic projects. And in the early 18th century, the Brits had a huge problem navigating the oceans. They lost a lot of sailors because they didn't really know where they were in terms of longitude, so east and west. They commissioned, we're going to be on this. They commissioned a 20,000-pound reward to anyone who could solve the problem. And a cabinet maker by the name of John Harrison, over a period of 60 years, progressively made clocks that were more and more accurate, to the point where in 1760, he had a clock that only lost 5 seconds in 6 weeks. And that's pretty powerful. It allows you to navigate to within 2 miles of your true location. Nowadays, we talk about navigation in feet and yards, but back then, it was certainly powerful enough to make a map and to send a boat somewhere reliably. So you would know, I want to be in Jamaica at such and such time to invade Jamaica or whatever you want to do. And you could do that. It made the Brits a world power. When you walk into the National Maritime Museum in Greenwich, this object, which is only a little bit bigger than a pocket watch, is the prized possession. And it really alone helped make the Brits a world power. It would be akin, so looking at that period of 60 years, it would be akin to today solving the energy crisis. That device really made a huge impact. You don't hear much about it, but if you talk to any sailor, they'll know all about the Harrison H4, which is that device, and it's truly a crowdsourced developed device.